Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Have you ever been awake in the dead of night, standing in a brightly lit room while the world outside is just pitch black? Well, that right there is the inherent vulnerability of the night shift. You've got the isolation, the absolute quiet, and this completely false expectation of safety just because you're standing behind a counter or surrounded by retail shelves. But the truth is, that glass separating you from the dark, it's incredibly thin.
So why exactly does the night shift become the perfect hunting ground for predators? Well, today we're going to break down the anatomy of a trap. We'll be exploring 4 true, terrifying encounters extracted directly from late-night workers. And look, by analyzing these events, we're not just telling scary stories here, we're really looking to understand the core psychology of survival.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Section 1. The gas station stalkers and the psychology of isolation. Out on lonely stretches of road, predators literally weaponize isolation. They use decoy tactics, a bit of psychological warfare, just to test their targets before making a move. Take a look at this timeline from a 2017 solo closing shift. It starts at 9 p.m. The worker gets a call and the voice sounds like a forced, kind of cheesy impression of Ghostface from the movie Scream. Now, you'd think it's just a prank, right? But skip ahead to 10:40 p.m. and the caller starts stating specific facts about the store, like pointing out exactly how quiet it is. Then, at 11:40 p.m., a man walks in. He isn't wearing a mask, he's just a regular-looking guy, but his face is completely blank. He buys a single bag of chips but spends 8 excruciating minutes just pacing the store, staring at the worker over the tops of the aisles. Now, during one of those earlier phone calls, the voice dropped a seriously chilling hint. He said, "I shouldn't be rude to people who know where I am." And that threat completely set the stage for what happened next. When the blank-faced man finally went to pay for his chips, he stopped at the door, turned his head, without turning his body at all, and gave this creepy, incredibly calculated smile. It was a smile that basically said he knew exactly what he was doing. He then walked outside and purposefully disappeared right into the camera blind spot near the woods. The worker was so freaked out by this deliberate vanishing act that she actually just locked up early.
And she was absolutely right to trust her fear, because as she made this terrifying sprint to her car in the empty parking lot, she heard fast footsteps. And it wasn't running, actually. It was worse. It was the distinct, terrifying sound of shoes just slapping the pavement. A rapid, aggressive speed walk, coming right toward her. She barely managed to peel out in her car. Tragically, though, when she told her boss about it the next day, he completely dismissed it as a coincidence, basically blaming her fear on the phone calls. Because her boss refused to acknowledge the very real danger she had just barely escaped, she quit on the spot.
Let's shift gears to another case, this one at 2:30 a.m. at another quiet gas station. A worker steps outside to get some air. He can literally see his cold breath in the hazy night. Suddenly, he notices a man in a red hoodie who seemingly just appeared out of nowhere. The guy is just shuffling around in this weird circular pattern near the gas pumps, clearly sizing the worker up. Eventually, the man comes inside with this very rushed, rehearsed-sounding story.
Now, what's really interesting about this is the terrifying contrast between the lie and the reality. The man claimed his car broke down and he just needed a flashlight or a jump. He even pointed to a car on the store's security monitor to prove it. But the worker had literally just been outside. That car hadn't been there 2 minutes ago. And looking closer at the monitor, the worker saw someone actually crouching in the dark by the bumper. So this wasn't some stranded motorist. This was a highly coordinated ambush.
The worker immediately retreated and hit the silent panic button. And here is where the predator's mask completely drops. The man didn't panic, he didn't act confused. Instead, he gave this slow, knowing grin, completely relaxed his posture, and then just bolted into the woods. When the police finally investigated that abandoned car, they discovered it had been stolen a week earlier. But more horrifyingly, a front door was left wide open, revealing that there were actually 3 people waiting in the dark that whole time. 3 people ready to trap one isolated worker.
Which brings us to Section 2, the coordinated abductions and multi-person traps.
You see, these aren't just crimes of opportunity or lone wolves. We're going to look at encounters at a dive bar and a Walmart to expose the terrifying reality of these organized, multi-person traps. Let's move to the dive bar encounter first, just to see how this builds. Step 1 is the scout. A clean-cut, sophisticated older man comes into a quiet weekday shift. He asks the bartender Cadence some slightly probing questions about her life, her schedule, and then leaves a crisp $100 bill. He's establishing a baseline, you know? He's scouting. A week later, we hit Step 2, the lure.
The scout returns, but this time he brings a trendy mid-30s woman who immediately starts complimenting the bartender, really trying to lower her defenses. She pitches this supposed $10,000 weekend working for an exclusive event club, but the moment Cadence firmly rejects the offer, the woman's friendly mask just instantly slips. Her tone changed completely as she told Cadence, "You should step outside for a second. There's someone who can explain it better." Cadence refused, and the pair eventually left.
Then we get to step 3, isolation, and this climaxed a few nights later. The woman returned right at closing time, stalling by ordering an old-fashioned. But the split-second Cadence turned her back to make the drink, the woman vanished out the front door. The bartender looked outside and saw an idling black van with unregistered plates. Suddenly, someone started violently rattling the back door, trying to flush her out to the front, where security cameras later caught 2 masked men waiting for her. Cadence survived for a few simple reasons. She locked the doors, she clutched a heavy metal shaker as a weapon, and her boss just coincidentally pulled into the parking lot.
But look, this level of coordination isn't just restricted to empty bars. It happens in massive stores too. Over at a Walmart at 2 a.m., a worker in the electronics section noticed a silent man hovering. He wasn't browsing for a TV or anything. He was just standing completely still, constantly shifting his position to watch her every single move. And to make matters worse, her work radio's battery was dead. Just as her panic is really starting to peak, an overly familiar woman suddenly grabs her arm, acting like an old friend. She whispers that the hovering man is recording her and pulls the worker away. Now at first, the worker felt this immense wave of relief. But as they walked past the registers and past the busy aisles, that relief turned into pure dread. The worker realized this so-called savior was dragging her directly toward the dimly lit, completely unmonitored warehouse side exit. Realizing it was a trap, the worker screamed and violently yanked her arm free, and as she sprinted back toward the safety of her coworkers, the fleeing woman made a massive, massive mistake. She yelled out the worker's actual name. Think about that. The worker had never given this stranger her name. In that terrifying second, it became undeniably clear. She wasn't just a random victim of circumstance, she was a direct target.
And this brilliantly illustrates the horrific reality of the situation, which was all captured on security footage. When they reviewed the tapes later, they found that the helpful stranger and the creepy, lurking man had actually walked into the store together. The whole thing was entirely staged. The man's job was simply to frighten her so much that she would blindly trust the woman, who was actually the mastermind steering her right into a trap.
So, the crucial point is, well, it brings us to section 3, trusting your instincts and the subconscious alarm.
How did these workers survive these incredibly sophisticated traps? They all faced terrifying situations, but they all walked away. Well, when we look at the survival denominators across all 4 of these stories, a really clear pattern emerges. First, they ignored polite social norms. The bartender bluntly said, "I'm good." The Walmart worker violently yanked her arm away. Second, they recognized anomalies, a car that wasn't there before, a customer who didn't buy anything. Third, they acted on their gut feelings. And finally, when the danger became clear, they fled immediately. They didn't stick around waiting for proof. Disregarding politeness absolutely saved their lives.
The worker from our very first story really summed it up perfectly with this quote. She said it was like my body already knew something was wrong before my brain wanted to admit it. Intuition isn't magic, guys. It is simply your subconscious mind registering threats, microexpressions, and anomalies at lightning speed, long before your conscious brain can actually articulate exactly what is wrong. When someone gives you a bad feeling, trust me, your brain has already done the math.
So I'm going to leave you with this question to chew on. Have you ever felt your body tell you something was wrong before your brain actually figured it out? The next time you feel that sudden chill or that totally inexplicable urge to just leave a situation, don't ignore it. Really, don't worry about being rude. Trust your instincts. They just might save your life. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and seriously, stay safe out there.